Okay, I'm going to cover how to tighten up the control valve on a 2000 series John Deere. This is a 2032R, and all the 2000 series are probably the same, even the 1000 series. So if you've got a situation where there's quite a bit of play left and right and up and down in the joystick that controls the loader, the front end loader on this machine, it's pretty common that you'll get some play in there just because there's two linkages that connect both the valves to the joystick itself. So when you look at this with the cover off, I've taken the cover off the seat area. I took the seat off as well, and I just changed out the control valve because it was bad on this machine. But what I'm doing now is trying to tighten up the lever a little bit because I just don't like the fact that it's so sloppy. The tighter you can get this, the more precise you can be with the loader, and the faster you'll be with the loader. So you want to get this kind of tight, with normal amount of play in it. So if you look at the root cause of this whole problem right now, there's this linkage. You can see it right there. There's two pins, and this is one of them, the up and down. You see how it's actually going side to side on that linkage versus being tight up against the rod in there. Well, what you can do is you can add some washers in there, and then that will take out a lot of that play, which will reduce the amount of free play in the actual joystick area. So that's what you're seeing, and that is really normal after 1,000 hours or so on a machine. They all do this. Probably all the 1000 and 2000 series machines do this. The 3000 and 4000 series, they're not set up with this style linkage, and they're probably just not prone to this problem because of that. But that's what's going on. It's not a super big problem, but for me, I'd like to try to get that tighter. So today what I'm going to do is try to put some washers in there, and then I'll show you the way it works after with the washers in there, and then you can see and you can do this fix for yourself as well. Okay, I was able to tighten up this linkage quite a bit. I think now it's pretty normal. You're up and down a couple inches, left and right a couple inches, so that's pretty normal. There should be a little bit of play, not a ton, and you'll see that the linkage, if you look in here, is a lot tighter. Still a little movement on that center one, but I put a washer in there, and I put a washer down here in this area where the shaft holds these two levers. Put a washer in there, and another washer on the connection to the valve itself from the linkage, which is behind this. You can't see it. That really added a lot of tightness to it, and now you've got an inch or two up and down and an inch or two left and right. Nothing major, and everything's smooth. You don't want to put grease on these because grease will turn into like more of a gummed up material. You want to use like WD-40 or something that's a little lighter just to keep some oil on there, but try not to put bearing grease on this or anything like the red and tacky grease, because what will happen is it'll start to get really hard, and then these little joints down here, they're kind of like ball joints, they'll get kind of seized up on you, and they won't be smooth. And what will happen is you'll go to put the lever down, and it will stay down, and it won't return back up. So that's kind of a problem with the loader, because you don't want to have to push on it and then pull up on it to stop it, right? You want it to automatically come back up again. So you don't want to put heavy grease on these joints, because you want this to be kind of a loose, free movement where the valves themselves have the springs internally that can return the valve to its normal resting position, which is like the neutral one. So the loader stops moving up or down if you take your hand off the lever, and the bucket stops curling if you take your hand off the lever. That's the whole concept with the valve. You should never have to force it the opposite way to stop it from moving. That's when it's starting to stick, or something is binding up in the valve itself, and it can be dangerous. Okay, I was able to get pretty much everything back together and put the seat back on, put all the covering back on underneath the seat. These little rivets will pop back on pretty easy if you just be patient with them and push them, take them all the way out. There's actually a rivet, and then there's a housing around the rivet. So you want to pop that rivet out of the housing, and then push the housing in first, and then push the rivet in second. So all these go back in nice and tight. Like I said, I've got about an inch or two of play on this, which is completely normal for these. Everything works fine, everything works great. There's a couple bolts I put in down here. This had rivets on it, but honestly, it's not strong enough. So I put a bolt with a nut behind it, and I used a lock nut on both sides of the plastic housing just to keep it from vibrating off. So we've got a much better connection there. I got the, this is a lighter outlet for an accessory, which goes back in behind. There's some wiring in there. So that is relatively easy. If you had two wires, there's two wires that go to this lighter element, and if the wires come disconnected, you can just splice them and then crimp them with some wire connectors back there. So that was really easy, and I think this is pretty much ready to go. These, like I said, this is a real common thing on these 2000 series and the 1000 series. The loader linkage becomes a little sloppy, you could call it, and right now this is pretty normal. You know, you can do about a 3 or 4 inch circle with the knob. Before I adjusted all this, I was getting about a 6 inch circle, so it took about half of the play out of it, which is some simple washers and spacers in there to tighten up the linkage. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully this is helpful to you if you attempt to do this. Relatively easy, I would say. Give yourself a couple hours, start to finish, to tear it all down the way I did, and then do the adjustments, and you'll be just fine.